watch out for her dark side. Yeah, she got some sharp eyes. See her for the first time, never let her out my sight. I just wanna stay up, look at you all made up. Dirty thoughts are seeping into my mind, I can't wait up. Ooh, she looks so good, got me straight in the mood. She read that room, she know just what to do. Moving that body, she dancing and shaking, it's making them crazy, she know how to move. She said she's ready to party, let's get it started. Tequila straight out the bottle. She looks so good when she's sipping a model. I can't get enough, I need you. I think this is lust, not love. Cause everything that we touch gives us a rush. And everything that we taste feels like a drug. Da 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 da. Fun, 4 shots and we turning up, dancing cause the night is young, too much fun, feel alive, in the night, she look good, she look right, we could live, we could die, here she come, channeling my Casanova, she got a body persona, she got a bite like a cobra, I'll take the venom, it's worth it to know ya, she pulling up with that body, I wanna make her a hobby, she got a face little naughty, I wanna chase it till I got her on me, I can't get enough, I need you, I think this is lust, not love. Cause everything that we touch gives us a rush. And everything that we taste feels like a drug. Da 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 I'm addicted to you.
Okay, so I was not expecting that to be the song. I love that group, but wow. That was not what I was ready for. How's everybody doing tonight? So, you all better make me rich and famous now, because I bought YouTube Premium for you. Okay? I have YouTube Premium. So by the end of the month, I want to be at least 1,000 views a video. Come on, guys. Let's make me at least $1 a day. Let's end this month with $35 positive in my pocket. Oh, leave me alone. I don't want to talk to you. Why do you want to talk to me? Meow. What do you want? Mm-hmm. All right, guys. So we're doing Politics Week. I think we're going to do politics and religion is how we're going to do it. So we're going to start off with my favorite couple of all time. And then from there, we are going to go on to other things. Okay, so let's get to these guys. I don't think we can do the George Rogan stuff because I think he's very litigious and very copyright happy. What are we looking for? Basecamp. Okay. It's a little bit angled wrong. I don't think that helped anything. There we go. Yeah, is that better? Is that worse? I don't know. Okay. I disagree with that altogether. All right, let's see. Yeah, we're going to do the cat lady thing today. And then we'll do some other stuff.
To
with
what was
it as
around
well.
34% before she was running. So
How
it's
curious.
interesting, like, this whole Kamala remediation campaign to like remediate her women in over 70% of single women identify as Democrat compared to only 45% of married women. Women in society historically, they would rely on a partner to help care for them and to help care for their kids.
Oh, and now
when
it's
you-
the state.
Yeah, and when you disintermediate the family unit, you can use the state both to decrease the BATNA of a woman to not have a partner, while
know what
also
BATNA is.
acting as the caregiver. Like, these women are sort of like nuns to the state. They're basically married to the state.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Nuns to the state. That is.
And I'd also note that this trend could explain, for example, why Black females overwhelmingly vote Democrat so much. Because when you look at the number of single women, 47% of Black adults are single compared to 28% of not white adults and 27% of Hispanic adults.
I wish we could see information on the extent to which single women are getting government services.
The number was larger than I thought. 90% of welfare recipients are single women.
Would you like to know more?
Hello, Simone. I am excited to be here with you today. Today, we are going to be talking about why single cat ladies are overwhelmingly voted for Kamala Harris.
But they're not all cat ladies, are they?
She'll become a crazy cat.
This. Now, obviously, a lot of this was started with JD Vance's cat lady comment, which is why I joked on that to begin with. Specifically, he said, a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And a lot of people took that really negatively because a lot of women framed that as personal attacks against themselves.
They call her the cat lady. People say she's crazy just because she has a few dozen cats.
Oh.
I mean, the cruelty is to women, and we'll do a whole other episode on this, who use cats to masturbate their parenting instinct. When I say masturbate, I mean that in a very literal sense, in the same way that sex is designed to attempt to get us to procreate and rear the next generation. Women also have these instincts that are designed to want babies so that they want the next generation. And they masturbate these instincts through, instead of childbirth, caring for small pets. Which satiates them enough that they do not, I mean, satiates them temporarily. We all know that's why they keep getting more, because that Labyrinth talks about how...
It's funny that he's super catty in all of his stuff, yet he's dissing. For some reason, Eric, your comment didn't pop up. Well, nuns for sure. I remember can't read that, given by Vox. Supporters are less religious, both literally and in rhetoric.
Her breakups trigger depressive episodes. And if you look at public
Hello, Eric.
statements in interviews like Miss Americana, the 2020 Netflix documentary, she alludes to fame making her fundamentally unhappy, which it doesn't need to. I mean, Simone and I have gathered a great deal of fame. Just today, another article in The Guardian came out about us, and I guess it's presumably attacking us, but they also published a slide deck we did on how to make new forms of government, which got me really excited. And I guess you can choose how you react to the things around you, and single cat ladies choose to react to it in self-indulgent ways, like Taylor Swift does.
For example, I don't think some of our friends who are childless and cat owners are miserable, but in general, if I were childless and I owned cats, I wouldn't be hurt by this. It's a joke.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it also shows sort of a victim culture on the left of like, he made fun of childless cat ladies. Therefore, although,
Well, they call parents breeders. I mean, just whatever.
If you
Who
have a
cares?
huge amount of cognitive, yeah, I've never taken offense to that, but like, it's an attempt to dehumanize your opponents, and I get that. But like, childless cat ladies is a bit different. It's not like really dehumanization; it's characterization along. It's like, when did you become a Republican? To the women who say this, and it's like, well, after I got married, and it's like, yeah, well, your daughter isn't getting married and has no ability to get married right now, given the way that she views the world and the way she views the opposite gender.
Well, and even just given the way that
Ability this be the case, but your daughter isn't married, and it's like, when did you become a Republican? To the women who say this, and it's like, well, after I got married, and it's like, yeah, well, your daughter isn't getting married and has no ability to get married right now, given the way that she views the world and the way she views the opposite gender.
well, and even just given the way that relationship markets work, there are so many single women we know who want to be married and just can't be married because they're high achieving women, and it's very, very difficult for them to find uncoupled, non completely weird and ruined in some way single men who are higher achieving than them.
Yeah, a hypothesis question, Simone. Why do you believe that when women get married, they become more Republican? I mean, you did.
To a great extent, you allowed me to understand that I was
So this is actually, for me, interesting. And I've noticed this both on the left and the right in the US and especially on YouTube. The ideas that they have about atheism and conservatism and stuff like that doesn't really fit in the rest of the world. So for instance, my wife is an atheist. She has a child. We've been married for 7 years. And she is the most Christian conservative person I know. I don't know Christians who live out Christianity as much as she does. She doesn't believe in any kind of God. She believes in the right to abortion. But in her day-to-day life, she's modest, she's humble, she doesn't cuss, she doesn't drink, she's hardworking, she's diligent, she's honest. Even though she tries to talk like she's a badass, she's very caring. So I think it's interesting that you have someone living out quote-unquote Christian virtues or Republican virtues who's literally a socialist. Like, she's literally a socialist. She's literally an atheist. But she's living out more of the Christian principles and more of the conservative principles than any conservative or Christian I know in real life in the United States. So I think a lot of this stuff is either bullshit, BS, or it's a misunderstanding of human nature. And so, yeah.
Permitted to have non-hyper progressive beliefs, and I did basically grow up in a cultural cult where I just thought that there were certain things you weren't allowed to think or believe.
So basically, you're saying it's communalism.
It could be that, and I think there's also some element of when you become very close with your partner, you start to identify with them and see the world through them. And I think that seeing, especially in this modern environment, seeing the world through a man's eyes can cause you to become pretty black pill to progressivism in general.
Yeah, well, I think that the movement, and I think this is probably the bigger thing, is that typically when people are married, they begin to see themselves as a combined identity. And also many of these women, once they're married, have sons. And I think when you see how genuinely cruel and sadistic.
And my wife, our son is 14 years old. So, she definitely has however she might have felt about men before, she definitely feels different about them now.
The existing urban monoculture and progressive party is to men, and how much it dehumanizes men. As we pointed out in our Bears video, right, where if you said this about any other group, when women were like, oh my God, like, I'd rather be in the woods with a bear than a man, and I then put into it, like, a black man, I'd rather be in the woods with a bear than a random black man, and you're like, oh my God, that is super racist. Like, what? How could you, black
Man is scary. With a bear. What I've heard about bears.
And it's just a lot easier to dehumanize men in general when you don't relate to them much at all in life.
No, I think you're absolutely right about this. And I think it's also that when people get married, they form a combined identity to an extent. And they stop, for example, for me, I don't identify as my own gender that much anymore. And I think that this is actually really similar to, if you go back to, let's say, my own gender, get married, they form a combined identity to an extent. And they stop, for example, for me, I don't identify as my own gender that much anymore. And I think that this is actually.
Hey, Twistanity. That's an interesting confession from a guy who's arguing for masculinity and arguing for whatever techno-Christianity is, techno-Puritanism, digital Christianity and techno-Puritanism. It's an interesting confession from him.
Actually really similar to, if you.
Because he is asking for traditional gender roles. So that is something he's promoting. So it's an interesting confession there.
Go back to, let's say, the 60s or.
J.D. Vance also had a similar confession on Joe Rogan, where he talks about, his gay past, I guess, technically. So that's an interesting thing there.
70s, where sometimes men would get married and then they'd be like, now I see how harshly our society has been treating women, and they become more interested in women's issues. I think we're seeing the opposite now, because I think anyone who is actually neutral on this.
That's wording it too strong. His queer past, I think, would be an easier way to word it. So I do think that there's some interesting nuances going on here, not to use it in a Sargon of Akkad way.
Sees that overwhelmingly our
Etta
society
Carl Benjamin.
male at this point.
Yes.
So I'm going to go further with stats here. The number of single women in the U.S. has increased 55% since 2000.
Whoa, hold on. Okay.
U.S. male at this point.
Yes.
So I'm going to go further with stats here. The number of single women in the U.S. has increased 55% since 2000,
Whoa, hold on. Okay.
reaching 43 million in 2023.
That is huge. But I guess that's just another angle of all the dismal dating and sex stats we've seen.
Well, I mean, the 55% growth that they've grown by more than half since 2000. I think something that we can forget is that in the same way the left might be motivated for immigrants to come into specific districts to vote, they would be even more motivated. So to be clear, among single women, they get a larger share of the vote than they do among recent immigrants, like first generation immigrants. They do better off to break women up. And I will note, single men also vote more democratically, which we'll get to in a second.
Well, this makes a lot of sense to me too, because in general, when it comes to government handouts, which typically come to be more supported or more widespread under Democratic leadership, women are the biggest beneficiaries by far. Single women especially. They're the ones who get the most in terms of food stamps and payouts and services and healthcare. Yep. When you look at what social services are provided on a state or federal level. So that also kind of makes sense, because in terms, like, even more than immigrants, it's single women who get the most.
Well, one theory that I have heard...
That's interesting. I don't really have a comment there, but I just want to say something so I'm not just watching.
About is that women in society historically, they would rely on a partner to help care for them and to help care for their kids.
Oh, and now it's the state.
Yeah, and when you disintermediate the family unit, you can use the state both to make it lower cost, like decrease the BATNA of a woman to not have a partner, while also acting as the caregiver. Like, these women are sort of like nuns to the state. They're basically married to the state.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Nuns to the state. That is.
And I'd also note that this...
That sounds clever, but that's basically just the old welfare queen's insult. So
trend could explain, for example, why black females overwhelmingly vote Democrat so much.
See what I mean?
Because when you look at the number of single women, 47% of black adults are single compared to 28% of not white adults, and
He's not being as clever as he thinks he is.
27% of Hispanic adults. And here I would note, if you're talking about like, born out of wedlock and everything like that, Hispanics have a higher marriage rate than whites. If you're like, or something.
Yeah, well, it's a more conservative culture, especially when it comes to things like marriage and having kids.
I would just say more, because they have stronger family units right now.
Sure, yeah, that too.
And I'll tell you something interesting about divorce in the Hispanic culture that I've noticed. I don't know if this is a trend or not, but the Hispanic culture, the Hispanic people that I know who get divorced, they stay together as a couple. So they're divorced, but they still live together. They still have sex with each other. They're still raising their kids together. So that's kind of an interesting trend I'm seeing here, at least in the Rio Grande Valley. So, yeah.
So
Wow.
Another fun thing you can see, I think part of this is progressivism has made women undateable and unmarriable, like the modern iteration of it. If you watch that video about like the woman who was in the Star Wars show twerking about how oppressed she is, like who would want to marry that? As we've talked about in our video about black men and how hard it is for them to find partners. This was the zombification of black culture video, where they used to be an even more conservative culture than white culture in terms of like family values, where they had half the number of children born out of wedlock as white culture. And this was as recently as the 60s. And now obviously it's astronomically more. But if we talk about like, where is this degradation coming from? And we'll get some, like, actually in this episode, some better understanding of how they corrupted black culture, which I think is really interesting. But the number of women and gender...
I don't know if we're going to be watching this for this long, but this video for that long. But if we get to it, we get to it.
Studies degrees has increased 300% since the 1990s.
Oh, who needs that? Where is the demand for this?
That's
Where
like
is the gender studies industry? Do they go to the gender studies factory to produce gender studies?
Well, here's the thing. I imagine... No, they go work for these...
No, to go to the e-girl factory. Come on. Get with it.
Bureaucracies, which hire them to like be the thought police at companies. And
Has Belle Delphine taught you nothing?
That's literally what...
She's only the greatest feminist of all time, only followed secondly by Sasha Grey. feminist.
They're getting a degree in is thought policing.
Oh boy.
And a lot of companies, as we pointed out, the way companies end up going woke,
And by the way, that's not a diss on Sasha Grey. I respect Sasha Grey immensely. She actually gifted me some subs on her channel one time. So I very much respect Sasha Grey. But I'm saying you got to look at who's the trendsetters and who's popular and what they're saying. You don't have to respect what they're saying. You don't have to agree with what they're saying. But if you don't think that Taylor Swift doesn't have sway over what women do, and that if Sasha Grey and Belle Delphine don't have sway over what men think is cool, you're insane. You're lying to yourself. You're Matt Fradd looking into a mirror, chastising yourself for thinking about porn. Like, you're insane. These women have more power over men than their wives. These women have more power over men than their sisters. They can say something's uncool, and every man in the world will stop doing that thing. And they can say something's cool, and every man will get on that hobby. So, believe me, you need to take the popularity of women. The women who are popular among men are not the women who are popular among women, and the women that are popular among men are not the women who are popular among women. But you need to take the women who are the most popular in each group very seriously, because they are very powerful for different reasons and in different ways. But you should take them very seriously. Helen of Troy would have been hated by other women, but she started a war because every man in Helen agreed to protect her. Okay? And that's not just the metaphor for the myth. That's how men work. So yeah.
Are like, okay, we need to put a few token whatever's in our company. Let's put them somewhere where they don't need to actually do anything so they can't damage stuff. And then they put them in HR, and then they end up filtering for everyone else, and they end up corrupting the entire company super quickly. And this has been a repeated phenomenon in companies. And if you're going to clean up a company, you have to start with HR.
Yeah.
HR could be completely unwoked. Anyone who's there other than on merit needs to be removed. And this is measurable merit in terms of who they're hiring, the output those people are showing, etc. Now,
and again, you don't need to just take my word for it. Look at Mata Hari. Look at, I was Helen of Troy. I just mentioned her. Look at Joan of Arc. The women that men follow are not popular with other women. Look at Queen Elizabeth. Look at Queen Victoria. Look at Cleopatra. Look at Empress Wu. These women are terrible to other women. But man, men will follow and fight and die for these women. And it's not because they're the most beautiful or because they're the most whatever else. It's usually talent and cleverness. Like the women who men respect is a different woman than the woman that other women respect.
An analysis last year from Pew Research Center found that 1/4 of all 40-year-olds in 2021 had never been married. All right, single women.
And this is a factor in the election. So I don't know if they're going to get into it in this one, but I was just watching something earlier today that relates to it. I wanted to get to it, but I don't even remember where the video is. But basically, the majority of people supporting Kamala Harris are single women. But married women and men of all kinds and all stripes, like men in general, MEN, men, and married women are supporting Trump. So you got like something like 70%. I'm not exactly making up that number. I'm like kind of conflating three different numbers into one number. They're about 70% of men and 70% of married women are supporting Trump, and something like 90% or maybe even 99%, but 90% of single women are supporting Kamala. So what they're saying right now is actually relevant to the upcoming election.
So let's talk about single women as a demographic. Single women are older, more educated, and more financially independent than they were a generation earlier. And they are more motivated to vote. In 2000, 48% of single women reported voting. In 2020, that jumped to 61%, according to the data firm Catalyst. Single women now make up 1/4 of the electorate. Single men, on the other hand, make up only 19%. So single men vote at dramatically lower rates than single women. So not only are there more single women, but they're voting at a higher rate, 48% in 2000 to 61% in 2020.
This is why the polls can't be trusted here. So even though Trump's ahead, I think last I looked, like by 1%. Once the polls actually open in the morning and once things start going forward, if the women show up to vote, if single women show up to vote, Trump can't win. That's just straight up. The reason why unpopular politics can still win the day is because it doesn't have to be popular with the men, and it doesn't have to be popular with the mothers, and it doesn't have to be popular with the married women. It has to be popular with the single women, with the single woman, because women are who's voting for Kamala. Single women are voting for Kamala. And they outnumber everybody.
Wow.
And here I'm going to put on screen a graph here that shows this over time. So you can see the proportion of.
But if single women don't vote, everyone else, the majority of all the other groups, are in support of Trump.
Of eligible single women and single male voters who showed up.
Oh, so civic engagement for single women is going up.
Yes.
I wish we could see information on, I don't know how I would measure this, the extent to which single women in the US are also getting government services, like, or benefiting from.
I'll look it up in post.
The number was larger than I thought. 90% of welfare recipients are single women.
That's an interesting thing. And I'd also point out here that I think that this partially, when you think about these women as fundamentally being married to the state, this one explains the increase in civil engagement, but it also explains the freak out when somebody like Trump is elected.
Yes, yeah.
Because to them, now the thing that was like their source of like care and like their essentially partner
Has become hostile.
Yeah, with something that they see as fundamentally hostile to them.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Now, here's a really interesting poll that I'll go over, but also put on the screen here. When Harris took over the ticket, her support among single women swelled. In June, before she became the Democratic nominee, less than half of single women in a YouGov poll reported a favorable impression of her. By September, this jumped to nearly 2/3, and her support is growing. A recent Ipsos survey found Harris leading among single women voters by nearly 40 points. So she went from less than.
So this is roughly covering the same information that I was going to find from a different source. So we might actually just stick with this a little bit longer.
Half supporting her to 70% supporting her.
Gotta thank Charlie SDX for at least 30% of that shift, I would say.
Who is
She was made cool.
the Brett Summer one?
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, single women are very vibes-based voters. You know, they are not exactly. Here's another interesting stat that was shown here. Among married women, only so remember, less than half, 45% of single women supported Kamala before she was on the ticket. 35% of married women had a favorable impression of her, so very low. And then at the peak of married women having a favorable opinion of her, that was August, and it was still well below 40%.
Wow. Okay,
So-
that's very interesting. So suddenly, single women started really identifying with Kamala, and yet married women.
And with married women, it's now since August into September, it's gone down again.
Wow.
So she only has, hovering around maybe like 36, 37.
Is Dave Rubin copyright happy? Because if not, I'm going to play his video next with Jillian Michaels.
Percent compared to what was around 34% before she was running. So
How
it's
curious.
interesting, like, this whole Kamala remediation campaign to like remediate her public image, it seems to have been incredibly effective among single women, basically fizzled among married women. Their impression of her now is not that different than their impression of her before she ran. Which I find really fascinating.
Yes. Wow. There's definitely something there. I need to think more about what that could be. Because also the funny thing is Kamala is married. Kamala has stepchildren. It's not like she should be some single woman icon, but definitely the Brat Summer association is more of an unhinged, messy single woman mood. And single women certainly appreciate more the sorts of government handouts and services that I think
That Americans across the board.
I don't like that generalization that they're making. It might be true, but I don't know. It doesn't make single women look good. I'll say that much. So I don't know how true that is, or how much of that just is their own opinion.
Have become increasingly supportive of access to abortion in any circumstance. But the shift among single women has been especially dramatic. in its 2022
So we're going to do a little bit at the end of Trent Horn because he did an update on his abortion views, and we're going to do a little bit of Lila Rose. I don't agree with either of these people's takes. I want to be very clear on that. I do have the Catholic stance. I'm not saying I don't. I just don't agree with specifically Trent Horn's approach on most things. So with Trent Horn, it's easy to agree with his conclusion. It's hard to agree with the way that he gets there. With Lila Rose, I don't know enough about her to know anything about her approach or anything like that. I just watched one video. It seemed a little offensive, and I thought it'd be interesting to watch tonight.
survey, 2/3 of single women said that abortion should be available for any reason, a view held by less than half of single women a decade earlier. So our country is becoming more pro-abortion, and I think that this is one of those things where you have not
We might even do Tyrone Magnus after those two, just to get a third view.
seen the same insane rise in Europe. And I think that a lot of this is downstream, as we've talked about in other episodes, of the view that life begins at conception, which, by the way, is not a biblical view. The Bible very clearly says life begins before conception. It's something that the Catholic Church made up about 200 years ago with Pope Pius IX, and then was chosen by the Republican Party. The Republican Party used to be actually the pro-choice party in the 70s. The Republican National Convention, they were more pro-choice than anti-choice, but they choose to accept it to try to bring Catholics over, and it didn't even work. Catholics still vote overwhelmingly Democrat. So I don't know why we keep it as a position. It's not a Protestant position. It's not a Christian position. It's a one that the Pope who did the Great Castration came up with. You know,
I don't know. I get the impression that many American Protestants are anti-abortion now, mostly because the Republican Party went anti-abortion.
Yeah, I see that. Like they are unaware. Like they think it's a Christian thing or like an ancient Catholic thing, and it's like not. Like as we point out, St. Augustus didn't think this. Thomas Aquinas didn't think this. Like no great Catholic thinker in history have thought this.
Yeah, I definitely.
I'd be interested to watch their video on abortion. I don't want to do it tonight. And tomorrow, I think we're going to be covering election stuff. We'll see. Again, this is politics and religion week, but you might actually think of this as religion in politics week.
I like that because we've met quite a few Protestants who are very suspicious of abortion, even hormonal birth control, and
before a nervous system has developed, which to me is just, but it's ended up destroying, I think, the Republicans' ability to earn ground share on this, and things are moving further and further in the opposite direction, which is leading to more and more abortions, which is like you're functionally like, do you want to like win? Do you want to lower the amount of abortions, or are you okay with so that you can masturbate to this aesthetic view towards abortion, continue losing?
And this is the problem with Trent Horn's approach, is what he's mentioning right there. Trent Horn and other people like Trent Horn, who are absolutists and are not willing to make room for exemptions, make it impossible for those who are in the middle to choose the Catholic view. That's just a problem. That's just a real problem. And in the video we're going to watch from him today, you're going to see he points this out. He is proud of the fact that he makes it impossible for someone to have a middle-of-the-road view. And I think he should be ashamed, because by having a middle-of-the-road view, you could lower the amount of abortions. Like, if your goal is to stop abortion, then making it illegal is the wrong approach.
Yeah, this purist view of life begins exactly at conception, instead of a more moderated view of, hey, you know, it looks like, you know, you're looking at killing a human regardless, but we see it as killing a human when you decide not to have kids. So, you know, where you start is arbitrary. I think when it really matters that you're killing a human is when you start killing a human that will feel pain as you kill them. And then you need to look at it very differently. And that's it. If we start looking at it at 12 to 15 weeks as, hey, let's put severe controls on this, so many abortions could be managed very differently. And we could probably have far fewer abortions, as you point out.
And you've pointed this out with people calling you, like Republicans will call you and be like, I want you to have a, life being in the conception stance. And you're like, well, my stance would dramatically, one, it's more likely to pass. Two, it would lower the number of abortions when contrasted with the person I'm running against. And they're like, no, if you won't take this stance, I'm voting for your opponent.
Yeah, meaning that they're voting for roughly more abortions. Yeah, just, I think that demonstrates how illogical.
I've pointed this out to Trent before, and he just either rage quits or he ignores whatever I type underneath his comments under his video.
And virtue signaling.
This is also the problem with Matt Fradd's view on pornography. So yeah.
No, it's about virtue signaling for them. They don't actually care about the children, or they would do.
Apparently not. Yeah, because if you did, you would be very focused on anything that gets you marginally closer to your.
I'd like to have this guy. Actually, I have to have both of them. I'd like to have both these people together in a room debating Trent Horn and Lila Rose. I think that would be amazing.
Preferences. And
Yep.
even if your preferences are absolutely zero abortions ever, you would still want to vote for me, even though I only care about controls after week 12. Oh,
Now,
well.
I'd also note, and this is important to note around all this, where people are like, well, Trump and his abortion. Trump has said that if elected, he would veto a national abortion ban. Veto, not support. He would veto one. So to go further here with stats, for most of the past 2 decades, women
This has been a good video so far. I've barely been speaking, and that's not good. I need to be speaking more, but this has been a good video.
felt largely content with their treatment in the US. That all changed after Trump's election and the hashtag #MeToo movement. Less than half of women in 2021's Gallup survey said they felt satisfied about the way they were treated in American society, a historic low. Single women were the least satisfied. And I will
Isn't that so funny that after supposed corrections to maltreatment against women, women started feeling worse when supposedly this mistreatment was happening unrecognized and unpunished.
But we've seen this in statistics in other countries where when equity, not equality, ends up becoming the goal, women become more unhappy. So dissatisfaction and depression increases with equity, not with equality. Equality doesn't increase depression, but equity does. So I think equity should no longer be the goal.
Women were happier.
Well, I mean, this is something you see across the board. As women get rights, they become less happy. I'll put a graph here that shows that in the mid-1970s, women were significantly more happy than men, and that women's happiness went down over time as they got more rights through the 80s into the 90s. And then by the early 90s, women net were unhappy with their lives.
I think this is largely what Phyllis Schlafly was famous for arguing, basically saying, why are you making us work? We don't want to work. We have it good here.
Well, and now
Do it
these
to us.
women are well, keep in mind, even in the 70s, the majority of women worked, Simone, or when this trend started. I don't think that's what this is in relation to. I think it's in relation to a vested interest among Democrats for
He had offended at his wife.
women to be unhappy and feel like they are victims.
I like how in this situation he's the feminist and she's the misogynist. That's funny.
And I think
Same thing they did with Black culture.
Yes. And so you actually see here, by the 2000s and mid 90s, women were net less happy with their lives than men. And that's been persistent since then. And it went up again dramatically, or I guess you should say down again dramatically with Me Too, and has stayed down since then. Where women, especially single
I might
women,
have to
feel
get her to
very
get a Kleenex.
disempowered, even if it is functionally not true.
Right.
And here I want to talk about more recent statistics. So one statistic I found really interesting was the anxiety, what was it? US-based mental health days for female and male differential, 1993 to 2021. And you can just see it shooting up specifically after 2019. After 2019, women's mental health absolutely explodes.
What do you think happened in 2019?
I think that this is when wokeism really began to take over mainstream culture. And many women began to identify with this is when the wokes basically won. I mean, and I think that the Black Lives Matter thing was like the victory lap. And
I think there's something more subtle too. I think this is when you saw much more pervasive use of remote therapy services, both through programs like BetterHelp, but also, which is private pay, and through health insurance providers. So you don't administer our family's health insurance. You don't see this. But starting in 2019, our health insurance provider started offering free mental health counseling as part of its benefit. Build a narrative about it that helps me identify with it personally.
we would be remiss to not point out that the possibility of electing the first female president is important to 60% of single women voters. What's interesting is it's not that important to married women voters.
Yeah, well, that makes sense because, again, as we discussed earlier, married women aren't necessarily just defining themselves as me, woman, anymore. It's me, family at that point, or at least me and my husband.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, I mean,
Because Sarah Palin really came off as feminine.
Okay, I
Well,
think we're
whatever.
good there with them. Hold on, let's go on to the next video. What did I say the next video was going to be? I forgot. I got lost in my own thoughts. Where were we? Let me see. I'm going to be looking for something. Should I play music while we're looking for something? Would that be more entertaining? We got to find ways to make this show more entertaining, people. We need we need more audience for the show.
Let's go. I got big dreams, I'ma do big things. Yeah, you see me on the big screen looking so clean. I don't move slow, I move fast, right past anybody taking life for granted. Yeah, that's too bad. I'd be grateful for everything that I have. You only got this life, you don't get it back. Make the most of it, become the best that I can. Everybody look at me, I got a plan. You gotta work hard, play hard, do it from the start. Cause how you do anything is everything it's art. Stay consistent and do it every day. Don't let fatigue get in your way. Cause 10% of something is better than nothing. You better do something if you wanna be something. I can feel my stomach rumbling, I'm hungry. Big things coming, I ain't bluffing, yeah. No, I don't wanna stay the same, yeah. So I keep pushing through the pain, yeah. That's the only way to make a change, yeah. So I fight every day and train, yeah. It'll all be worth it. One day it'll all be worth it. So I keep pushing through the pain, yeah. That's the only way to make a change, yeah. I've had enough, I'm making my own luck. Adrenaline, my drug, I'm sick of feeling stuck. I got this, will not quit to the top, I promise. Cause I've had enough.
Pornography was legal, including stuff with children. And you have the chance to outlaw at least the child stuff. Even though most people are not going to go far enough to outlaw adult pornography, you could at least get enough people to outlaw the child. First, in state after state, pro-lifers have failed at the ballot box, and legal abortion has remained the status quo in most states. We are, as St. Paul says, struck down, but not destroyed. There is reason to hope, and there are things we can do to advance the pro-life movement. First, we need to recognize that overturning Roe versus Wade through Dobbs versus Jackson was a huge victory for the pro-life movement. It was something I thought I'd never see in my lifetime. And more than a moral victory, studies have shown it saved thousands of lives. That alone made the decision worth it. Now, some people say that after
We'll watch something on this as well, if I can find the video. There's a video that counteracts what he's saying and shows it to be inaccurate at best.
Dobbs, abortions increased in the United States, so the pro-life movement failed. Some of them even insinuate that pro-lifers caused this increase. But it's a logical fallacy to say that because abortion rates went up after Dobbs, that means Dobbs
Oh, there you go.
caused the abortion rates to go up. Specifically, that's the after, therefore because of fallacy. Abortions were going up before Dobbs, as shown in this article published before the ruling, and pro-abortion research organizations say this was due to a variety of factors. For example, between 2017 and 2020, abortions increased by 25% in the state of Illinois because state Medicaid funds can now be used to pay for abortions, and the number of abortion facilities in the state increased by 20%. And in 2021, the FDA removed the in-person requirement for dispensing abortion pills, making chemical abortions available by telemedicine. So while other factors caused the rates to go up in general, it would have been worse if pro-life advocates had not passed laws to protect. Why is that? Well, the number of people who identify as pro-life is at one of the lowest levels since the mid-90s.
And one of the things that Trent Horn gets wrong on this topic is the way that he views people who are I'm going to say pro-abortion. People that are pro-abortion. He just gets some of the stuff wrong. So, for instance, when I was younger, I was actively pro-death. Like, I wasn't pro-choice, I was pro-death. It took me a long time to become pro-choice. I became a free will absolutist. Once I became a free will absolutist, I believe that everybody had the right to choose whatever it is that they wanted to do, including the consequences. They didn't make them free of the consequences, but they got to whatever they chose would be their choice, and they had to deal with the consequences of that thing, whether it be legal or not legal. Like, it was their consequences. And so I was a free will absolutist and a free choice activist. Free choice, not pro-choice, just to be very clear. And I held that view for a very long time, including when I first became Catholic. My first year of being a Catholic, I still believed in absolute free will and in the free choice philosophy. It isn't until reading the Church Fathers that my views on that changed. So that had nothing to do with Trent Horn, by the way. That had to do with reading the Church Fathers.
39% according to Gallup polling.
And the Liturgy of the Hours.
But that does not mean we should just give up. This is what we'd expect in a fallen world. If people just voted on virtue or vice, vice would often win. That means we have to take a sober look at why this is happening and reflect on the most prudent path forward. And to be clear, the goal is not to merely reduce abortions. Just saying we should fight poverty doesn't mean abortion will go away. There are states and entire countries that have economies that pro-choicers love, but their abortion rates are equal to or higher than the US's. Besides, even pro-choicers can support reducing abortion. It's the pro-life goal of protecting the unborn under the law that I'm concerned about. What's the path to that goal? Now, right off the bat, I want to say that I'm not an expert in policy or strategy. My book...
No, you are not. Your approach on many of these things pushes people away from religion and away from your own points of view. You're very bad at that part of being an apologist. You're great at defending the faith. I think I said this many times before, especially when I was using Catholic Answers as a resource directly. You're excellent at research and you're excellent at presenting the information that's out there. You just are. But you're terrible at making arguments for your for the information you present. You just absolutely are. You have never convinced me of anything, and I've been listening to you for years. Like since your first year on Catholic Answers, I've been listening to you since then, and there is not one thing you have ever convinced me of. Not a single issue. Even when I know that all the facts you present are correct, you still have not been able to convince me. Jimmy Akin's convinced me on things. Tim Staples has convinced me on things. Gavin Ortlund has convinced me on things. It's not like not like I'm invincible to being convinced. You can convince me of stuff. Just you personally have never convinced me on anything.
Persuasive Pro-Life teaches people how to show the pro-life position is true. But you could have all the right arguments and still lose if you have the wrong strategy or if you miss other problems. For example, there's the problem of pseudo-pro-lifers. These are people who say they're pro-life, but they vote pro-choice. These voters may say they're pro-life because that's what their church teaches, or it's what their community believes, or they would just never personally have or pay for an abortion. But they don't want to impose that on other people, so they don't vote pro-life. We didn't notice the prevalence of these people in the past when it was just polls.
No, you didn't notice the prevalence of the people of the past because you're kind of up your own ass on this topic. That used to be my position. Like I said, in reading the Church Fathers and reading the Didache, my opinion changed. But you would act like as if people who were like, okay, even if I believe it's wrong, I don't believe it's my right to tell someone else to live this way. You don't understand that point of view. You want this to be a Christian nation. It is not a Christian nation and will never be a Christian nation and should never be a Christian nation. The world is not of heaven. It's not of Christ. The world is not God's kingdom. Jesus is not trying to create heaven here. He's trying to create, he already has the new heaven, the new kingdom. Like that's where we're going. That's not here. To be of the world. And if they choose not to follow us, then they're not subject to our rules. That is what Paul says. You are trying to force people who are not of us to live under our rules. If they choose to be a Christian and to be a Catholic and to live under our dogmas, then yes, then they follow our rules. But if they choose to reject our religion or our God, we have no right to force them to live under Christendom because this is not a Christian nation. It's not. It's not even a Christian world, man. People have the right to decide for themselves what they do or do not want. And in a democracy, people have the right to vote. And yeah, you can make an argument for people to vote in your interest. But you should not be forcing people who do not agree with you, especially when the majority of people do not agree with you, to live under your law. Because you're not God. And God doesn't even force people to live under his law. He allows people to disobey him. Do you understand? The absolute power that we both believe in, allows people to disobey him and allows people to choose hell. He judges people to go to hell. What reality are you living in that you think your opinion is the opinion that everyone else must have.
Asking people if they were pro-life or pro-choice. But the only polls that count are elections and ballot initiatives that have shown that when it comes to abortion, we are outnumbered more than we thought. A large contingent of self-described pro-lifers are really pro-choice on abortion. There's maybe like, what, a handful of people who are secretly pro-life, but publicly...
No, that's bullshit. They're not secretly pro-abortion. They're pro-life, but they don't believe they have the right to dictate for the other person what they should believe. That doesn't make them any less honest. That doesn't make them any less pro-life than you. Look at your face, dude. Look at your face. You're ideologically possessed. That's not God. That's a... Come on, man. Look at your face. You're not being merciful. You're not fighting for the right of the child. You're fighting for your ideology. Listen to what Simone and whatever her husband's name is was saying. By making abortion legal, you can lessen the amount of abortions people have. But you can't go full swing into leftism or progressivism, because then that doesn't stop anything. But there's a middle road that actually has better results than the extreme of trying to stop everything, because trying to stop everything stops nothing. This is true for drugs, true for pornography, true for abortion. You're an extremist.
Pro-choice, that's not enough to balance out the harm of these many pseudo-pro-lifers. This is like how false Christians reveal themselves when times of persecution come. Pseudo-pro-life.
I got news for you, buddy. I've been persecuted for my faith. I've been to a country where Christianity is not allowed, and I still live my faith. I've been in a room full of atheists and anti-theists and stood my ground. I'm not talking to the choir. I'm not talking to a bunch of believers on a channel called Catholic Answers. I'm not talking to Catholics on a channel called Catholic Answers, telling them that what they believe is right. I'm in the trenches. On this channel alone, I'm in the trenches. I'm in Dan McKellen's comment section arguing with anti-theists. You're not. I have your Twitter. I see what you put out there. You're not doing the hard work.
Lifers falter when someone tells them their pro-life vote hurts women, and so they end up voting pro-choice instead. These people have also realized that they will be held accountable for their views, and so they're finally motivated to come out as who they really are, pro-choice. That's why, at least for now, pro-lifers should focus on achieving success through state legislatures. This happened in Texas and Georgia.
And the Texas thing is backfiring. Adam and Stitch, that's where I had the other statistics from. That it just came up to me because they talked about this also. Adam and Stitch is a 7-hour show. I don't know if I could even find the section they were talking about when they were covering the stats on both the abortion thing, the porn thing, and the abortion thing. So I don't even know if I can get to those stats. But seriously, your plan is backfiring. Your plan for absolute abortion bans is backfiring. You're killing people. People are dying. And once those stories get out, then there will be no limitations on abortions. Because your method doesn't work for everybody, and you're saying it does.
And the politicians that passed these laws did not lose their seats in the following election cycle, which shows protecting the unborn is not a toxic issue, even though some politicians act like it's toxic.
It's not a toxic issue. It's a great issue. We're going to do Tyrone Magnus later in a little bit.
There was a time when Democrats...
I might try and do a little bit of Adam and Stitch, but I don't know how we're going to fit that into the show.
Feared mentioning the A word. And Bill Clinton was successful because he argued for abortion to be safe, legal, and rare. But now pro-choicers have abandoned that language. They champion abortion as a good thing, and they see it as a helpful issue in political debates. But it shouldn't be that way, because killing unborn children is indefensible. Matt Walsh reaches a similar conclusion.
There are so many landmines for the left on this issue that they're able to just like jump over because we don't guide them into it. So, and I've been waiting for some.
Okay, so we're going to jump into Lila Rose real quick because this is just going to get into bigotry. Oh, it really does get into bigotry toward the very end. Short version, if you're Catholic, you need to be pro-life. If you're Catholic, that's what the stance of the church is, so that's what your stance has to be. You can get there by any mental gymnastics you need to get there. If you're not Catholic, you don't have to follow our rules. Do you want me to connect the dots with heaven and hell and all that other stuff? You can connect them yourself. So, if we were a Christian nation or if we were a Catholic nation and we were submitting to the rules of the Catholic Church or submitting to the rules of God, then yes. If we were a monastic or I forget what the word is for a theocracy. If we were a theocracy, then yeah. You're right, Trent. But we're not. We're a democracy. We're a republic. People have the right to vote, and if people don't agree with us and don't believe in what we believe in, and by the way, the majority of the United States is not Catholic, then we have to allow for their views to be heard. And we have to allow for them to disagree with us. That doesn't mean that we don't live by our standards, but we cannot force anyone else to live by our standards. They get to live by their standards, even if their standards are completely against our standards. That's the price of free will, and that's the price of freedom.
Someone to do this, and I guess it's not going to happen this cycle, but in one of these debates, sometime I would love for a Republican to just turn to the Democrat and say, okay, what we're really talking about here, this is the fundamental issue here, is what is a person? When is a person
That's
a
your next
person?
movie.
Right, well, maybe it will be. When is a person a person? So you turn to the Democrat.
And we won't stay on this topic forever because this is not even a topic I like talking about. So I want this to be explicit on my channel just once. By the way, she's got the majiggy here.
How I plan to vote on November 5th on Election Day. I have been very critical of Kamala Harris and her extreme pro-abortion platform. As you guys know, I have...
And before we call it a night, I'll try to find a pro-Kamala, at least one or two pro-Kamala people to feature on here, just to be fair.
Also been critical of many of the pro-abortion positions that President Trump has taken, especially in the last few months. We have done many episodes on this. We've also wrestled with the question of how to vote when both candidates support abortion to varying degrees. What does that mean for the pro-life voter? And so after a lot of prayer and thought and wrestling with this for weeks, and I will say hoping and praying that President Trump particularly would change course on this because he has indicated some movement in the past. So I've been hoping, we're up until really the final hour here that he would change. And there have been some concessions, which we're going to talk about here and I'm going to share. This is an essay that I have published to X and to social media, and I wanted to share that essay with you guys now. The essay is titled, What's a Pro-Life Voter to Do? I have publicly opposed both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's positions on abortion over the last few months. I have been asked repeatedly over the last few days by media, allies, and friends who I will be voting for on November 5th, or if I'm planning to just sit it out. This essay explains the thought process behind both my public opposition to the candidates' positions, the difference between their positions, and my vote. For many, including myself, the single most important issue to consider when deciding who to vote for is the candidate's position on basic human rights, particularly the right to life. Human life is sacred, and every human possesses the right to life, starting in the womb.
Again, me as an individual, up until I was 17, 22? No, 22. Up until I was 22, I was actually active pro-death. Like, pro-death. It wasn't, and I was an anarchist, and I was pro-chaos. It isn't until sometime around 21, 22, when I was reintroduced to Socrates. I'd already read Socrates when I was like 15, but when I read him again, when I read Plato again the second time around in college, that my views changed there. Plato and Aristotle and Kant and Mill had a very high effect on me, heavy effect on me in college. So did Hegel, and so did Sartre, just to be very clear. And Nietzsche had a very heavy positive effect on me. He's actually the reason why I stayed a Christian, was reading Nietzsche. We can talk about that later. Like I said, after reading Mill and Kant, I was a free will absolutist and Hegel. I was a free will absolutist for maybe another 10 years, 12 years, until I hit my 30s. And then in reading the Church Fathers, I switched from that to now I believe in limited free will. But that's only because I've read the Church Fathers, and right now I'm still stuck in Jerome. That's where I'm at right now. I'm in Jerome.
Abortion, the intentional destruction of a preborn child, is the leading cause of death in America, killing 3,000 children daily. When both of the two main political parties have hostile anti-life
So from here, we're going to go to Tyrone. From Tyrone, we're going to go to Warren Smith. If we have time, from there, we're going to go to Stitch and Adam. And that might be the end of the show. I was going to do the Jillian Michaels Rubin Report interview. I don't have time for that to do everything that I want to do in this video tonight.
policies. What is a pro-life voter supposed to do? Let's start with Kamala Harris's positions and why I believe no pro-life voter should cast their vote for her. As Attorney General of California.
So for me, the number one issue has always been free speech. The number two issue for me is freedom of religion. The number three biggest issue for me is gun rights and the right to bear arms. And I don't just mean guns, I mean swords, I mean all of that. Those are my top three issues. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and then freedom, the right to bear arms, the freedom to have weapons, basically. After that is freedom of press. I can't do that. I can't. So it's going to have to be like that. Freedom of press, and then after freedom of press is going to be taxes. The tax policy is my sixth most important thing. International trade comes after that. When I get toward it. Freedom of movement, freedom of assembly. Who has the right to vote is important after that for me. And then the issues just start not to matter, to be very blunt. That's the way that I vote.
California, Kamala Harris selectively prosecuted pro-life journalists.
You want my vote as a Democrat? I have yet to support a Democrat openly. You want my vote and support as a Democrat? Believe in freedom of speech, believe in freedom of press, and believe in freedom in the right to bear arms, and actively defend those things to your own party.
Who exposed Planned Parenthood selling baby body parts, which is a federal crime. At the time, Kamala Harris was also accepting money for her then Senate campaign from Planned Parenthood. Harris also used her power as Attorney General to attempt to force pro-life pregnancy center nonprofits to post abortion advertisements in their clinics. Harris has said that if she were president, she would pass federal legislation codifying Roe v. Wade.
You know, now that I think about it even heavier, reading Nietzsche and reading Socrates and reading Aristotle probably saved my life and gave me morals that I didn't have on my own.
Which would legalize abortion on demand without restriction through all 9 months of pregnancy. This would supersede.
Which is funny because I don't reread those authors over and over again. I reread, you know, the Book of Five Rings, The Art of War, Machiavelli the Prince, and the Tao Te Ching. Those are the books I reread over and over again. And now I reread the Bible over and over again. But the authors, the writers that actually saved my life and made me a better person were Kant and Mill and Plato and Aristotle and Nietzsche and Hegel and Sartre. Those are the writers, those are the works that saved my life.
Exceed all life-saving laws at the state level. Kamala Harris opposes conscience protections for
And helped change me from a monster into a human being.
healthcare professionals, meaning she would force, if she had the power and the ability, she would force healthcare professionals and hospitals to commit abortions or else lose their ability to practice medicine. Disturbingly, Harris has made unfettered support for abortion a central tenet for her entire presidential campaign. She's also
Yeah, but you've made being anti-abortion your entire career, so it's not. Let's not play that game.
been the first candidate for U.S. president to tour an abortion clinic as a publicity stunt. Harris's campaign has also spread massive amounts of misinformation about abortion.
But again, remember who is voting for Kamala and who supports Kamala. Single women. Single women are more likely going to be pro-abortion. So the largest voting bloc in the United States is single women. The people who want abortion rights and unfettered, unlimited abortion rights are single women. Therefore, Kamala Harris is correct in playing to her base. That doesn't mean she's morally correct, but that means that her strategy to win the office is to stress the issue that's most important to her constituents. She is doing what a politician is supposed to do. She's representing her side. What your job should be is to make your position more appealing and more reasonable to the voting public. And not just to men, and not just to married women, and not just to mothers. You have to convince the single woman, the single young woman, why your position is correct and their position is wrong. And you don't do that. I've seen your stuff. I've watched some of your debates. You yourself did something that Trent Horn has never done. You helped push me on that issue to get me onto the pro-life side. But you don't push. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't you. It's the scientist that he had on his show one time. Was that you? Are you the scientist? I don't know if you're the scientist. It could have been someone else. But anyway, whoever the scientist was who was talking about the genetics of a human being and when life begins according to science, that spoke perfect to me. But you're not speaking to the rest of the world, and you convinced me, a man, to agree with you, if it was you. What you didn't do was convince women that they're wrong, or women that you're right. That's not what you did, and that's not what you do.
Claiming that miscarriage treatments are being banned in pro-life states.
You're too militant and you're too zealous.
They're not. And blaming abortion-related deaths, like Amber Thurman, who took the abortion pill, on pro-life laws. The recurring message in nearly every interview and speech that Kamala Harris gives centers on her unflinching support for abortion. And this is only an effort to court swing voters and so-called moderates. President Trump's allies gutted the Republican Party platform on life.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to hear.
What his
There we
campaign
go.
has chosen instead is a path that Republican Party platform included the relatively works to thwart.
So here's the part that I wanted to play for my audience, which I know kind of dropped out with the Trent Horn thing. I know. I get it. Nobody wants to hear Trent Horn talk about abortion. I really do get it. But this is a political... This week is politics. And so we're talking about the hard political issues because on my channel, we don't flinch. We don't flinch away from the hard stuff. This is the hard stuff. Okay. I want to explain to a lot of people out there that don't get this. The conservative right and the far right, both those aspects of the right, do not support Donald Trump right now. because Donald Trump will not take a hard stance on abortion. He's actually pro-abortion rights for women, if you will, pro-women's rights, pro-reproductive rights, making it a free choice for them to the states to decide. He wants to make it a state issue and not a federal issue. That's his point of view. He's an ex-Democrat. He really does believe these things. Hear her articulate the conservative Republican stance against Trump.
The rights of pro-life Americans, including conservatives and Christians, to advocate for the pro-abortion campaign in American history. She not only stands against conservatives and Christians to advocate for these children. Let's talk about the Republican side. For over 40 years, the Republican Party platform included the right to life. But in an apparent effort to court swing voters and so-called moderates, President Trump's allies gutted the Republican Party platform on life and marriage. What his campaign has chosen instead is a path that prioritizes supposed political convenience over fundamental human rights. Several weeks ago, J.D. Vance said that he and Trump support access to abortion pills, which account for 60% of all abortions. Nearly 2,000 children a day are killed by abortion pills, and 1 out of every 25 women who use abortion pills will end up in the hospital with complications caused by them. They are dangerous for women and deadly for the children that they kill. Trump has also announced his support for taxpayer-funded IVF, in addition to being incredibly expensive.
The fight against IVF is a losing battle for Christians and Catholics of all stripes. You're not going to get the general public on board with this, especially as things become more digital, as the science gets better, and as coupling becomes less and less and less. When digital technology becomes the only means for procreation, you can't illegalize it because people still are going to want to reproduce.
Anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 per live birth, IVF is incredibly risky for women. And for every IVF-created human embryo that survives to the point he or she can be implanted, many of his or her embryonic siblings are callously discarded for their perceived imperfections. Of the human embryos that do survive this harvesting, millions end up indefinitely frozen, suspended in a cruel limbo, waiting to either become convenient enough to be given the chance to live and grow or to die like their many siblings. IVF commodifies children, turning them into property to be created, used, or destroyed at will. Trump and Vance have also expressed support for abortion exceptions for rape and incest and oppose a national abortion ban. They say that
those exceptions are actually good exceptions to have. That is where the majority of America is. And if your side could simply compromise on those exemptions, you would win. By being an extremist, by being an absolutist, by being a zealot, you're going to lose. No matter how righteous you think your cause is. Hey, Eighth Day Independent.
abortion should be an issue left to the states, and Trump has criticized and undermined pro-life state laws, such as Florida's heartbeat law. Trump and Vance may believe that these positions are politically more expedient. I've had many people tell me, Lila, they're just trying to win an election. But there is no...
Or they actually want to protect lives and not win a political battle or an ideological battle. A symbolic victory is not a real victory. Roe versus Wade being overturned, that's a symbolic victory. It's not a real one. You haven't changed people's opinions on abortion.
Middle ground when it comes to life. Every child, no matter how he or she is conceived, has a right to be given a chance at life. And they don't have a voice, but we do. Every abortion intends to end the life of a child. Either there is a right to life or there isn't.
Or change your language. And as far as I know, these exemptions are not even considered abortion on an ethical standard, on a moral standard. If the life of the mother is in danger, abortion should be allowed. If the child is inviable, meaning it doesn't have a head, doesn't have a heart, it's not going to live, it's below the threshold for when we can actually extend life, so it's going to die. If it is, if there's a miscarriage too early, it's going to die. Those exceptions need to be in the law. if you do that, you might actually get more votes.
Abortion is not a states' rights issue. Abortion is a human rights issue, and it is.
Everything's a states' rights issue. There is no such thing as human rights. There just isn't. Human rights are defined by humans. Animal rights are defined by humans. We can argue and believe and stand by the fact that these are God-given rights. And that argument worked for a very long time. As the majority of the world becomes atheist or spiritualist or pagan, but as the majority of the world is no longer Christian, the argument that our rights come from God is not going to work on someone who doesn't believe a God exists.
Already unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment, which declares that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property.
But now we're arguing definitions about personhood. And you cannot argue personhood before a person is a person. You have to argue from a moral point of view. And you can say the dictate that no Christian, no Catholic can have an abortion. And if you're going to be of us, you have to be one of us. You have to follow these rules. And you can tell the rest of the world, you guys shouldn't be doing that. You should be doing this. But you shouldn't force laws. How can I make you understand? We would think it's wrong, evil, if a Protestant nation, early America, made laws that said that having communion was illegal, and we would break that law willingly and openly. In fact, during the lockdown, many Catholics broke the law to receive communion. There are people who feel that strongly about abortion, or that strongly about sex, or that strongly about pornography. They believe these are free rights issues, bodily autonomy issues. And without regulation, many, many deaths and murders happen. Yes, Eighth Day Dependent. Telling a pagan to follow Christian rites, R-I-T-E-S, is insane. Telling an atheist to worship God is insane. You have to convert them first.
Property without due process. To his permanent credit, Trump historically appointed 3 of the Supreme Court justices who helped overturn Roe v. Wade, the poorly decided Supreme Court decision that legalized abortion on demand nationally.
But the problem with Roe v. Wade is that it was a bad case. It was a bad example. It was a bad ruling. Even going back to its original commentary on the ruling, people knew it was a bad ruling. It was a compromise that shouldn't have happened. That's why it got overturned. It didn't get overturned for religious reasons. It wasn't religious ideology or dogma that caused the overturning of that ruling. And when we talk as if it is, we're losing support by people who don't believe in a God.
The overturn of Roe was a tremendous milestone for the pro-life movement. But overruling Roe is only meaningful if laws are passed that protect preborn children at all stages of development. For Trump to oppose many of these pro-life laws when it was his judicial appointments that paved the way for them.
From Tyrone, we're going to go to Warren Smith. From Warren Smith, we're going to go to Stitch and Adam, and then we're going to call it a night, guys. What's going on? Why am I not able to? Come on, videos. What's going on? Hello. What's happening here? There we go. All right, where is it? I think it's this video. Yeah, I think you know. I think it's this one.
Newness, positivity about her. Zero. Hey, Sean Hannity. Nothing for Americans generally. See, Bill. Trump called.
Let's see what they have.
Insiders and special interests. Democrat Party oligarchs and operatives. She's a creation of Washington insiders and special interests.
I was going to say, that's what it feels like. I've been talking to you for a while about how it feels manufactured.
I love this guy, by the way. If you're not subscribed to him, go subscribe to him.
And slick media companies.
Trump. Even, I guess.
Here's BS. Most Americans self-righteous platitudes out of the other side.
No, that's not the video I'm looking for. Where is it? Maybe he took it down. Let me check out this one. This one might be the video. If this is not it, we'll move on to Warren Smith.
What is happening, Magnus? So from what I understand, for that reaction. So let's check this out. That's a difference. Anyway, post comments down below. Let me know what you all with it. And if you can still stand behind abortion, reproductive care.
Oh, here we go.
We'll show us the way. Hey, I got a question. Why on podiums like that do they have two mics when you really only need one? Why? I'm really curious about that. Reproductive care. Sure. And check this out. Hey, black folk, look up Planned Parenthood's history. Look up the history of Planned Parenthood, who started it, why they started it, what they wanted to do with it. And if you can still stand behind abortion, then, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I think that therapy is in session. Okay? Therapy is definitely needed for you. Post comments down below. Let me know what you...
So the person who founded Planned Parenthood was trying to sterilize, at least according to all the articles I read, her goal was to sterilize poor communities. So, yeah.
Mark Levin, and this is a
Their founder was a racist.
special edition of Life, Liberty, and Liberty Sunday. 3 guests, me, myself, and I. It's The most sinister,
Well, he took his glasses off.
diabolical, even evil campaign ever run by any political party in American history. And I'm talking about Kamala Harris and the Democrats.
Wow.
I don't think it's the most evil campaign, but that's okay. There's other campaigns that have been more evil, just not as successful.
Every American who's not a card-carrying member of the Democrat Party should be disgusted by what has been and is being done to you, to them, all the people of this country. Kamala Harris is a fiction. She's a concoction. She's a mirage. She's a creation of Washington insiders and special interests.
I was going to say, that's what it feels like. I've been talking to you for a while about how it feels manufactured. How she seems fake. Her different accents. The sketchy past of what her blood is, who her family is, who her grandmother is. Like, all this stuff doesn't seem right. Her inability to answer questions. Something's just not right, man. Something's just not right. And I know about the dirt under her fingernails. With
Her staff, 92% of whom have either been fired, who uses
Clinton, Obama, Trump.
He does have a point here. There are presidents and presidential candidates who seem presidential, and there are those who don't. Hillary Clinton seemed like a president. Michelle Obama seems like a president. Not just because they were married, not just because they were the first lady, because they were married to the president, but they actually seem presidential. He says Tulsi Gabbard seems presidential. I don't know. But you have candidates who don't seem presidential. Dan Quayle didn't seem presidential. Sarah Palin didn't seem presidential. Ross Perot didn't seem presidential. So, there are candidates who do seem like a president. Biden does not seem like a president. I don't think he should have been president. I think he was a bad choice. I think Trump was a bad choice for president the first time around. I think the consequence of voting Trump into office is this election. Because the retaliation to Trump was so terrible that now Kamala Harris is our candidate. We got Biden because of Trump, and we got Kamala because of Trump. Because that's the reaction. We don't have any new, good, well-rounded, centrist-appealing Democrat. We don't. We have puppets for the extremists because we put in a joke candidate into office. And he ended up being a fine president. Like, he wasn't the worst president of all time, but he talked a lot of trash. And all that trash he talked and all the bad reputation that he has just undermines the presidency and undermines the value of the office and everything. So, regardless of who you vote for now, whether you vote for Trump or for Kamala, you're voting for either of these two people as a consequence of Trump being in office the first time. Like, these are our best options because we threw away the best options at that point in time.
Even, I guess, Biden may be the first.
to turn President Trump into the devil.
They've been
and
doing that.
herself into this genius, happy angel.
Well, all good creator that you could sit down and have a conversation with right now, hypothetically, to do this. So what did she say? It was a student on campus talking to somebody, and I was like, wow, the way she answered.
Let's go back.
Just total disregard for her, the teachings.
She was to allow good use but limited to friendly media. Well, that wasn't working. So their third and current strategy, an all-out character assassination campaign to turn President Trump into the devil.
They've been doing
and
that.
herself into this genius, happy angel.
And again, from this one, we're going to Warren Smith, and then we're going to call it a night.
$2 billion in paid commercials. Billions in in-kind corporate media propaganda. But at no time does Kamala Harris, no time, say what her plans are for the future of our country. She keeps talking about the future. We keep listening. All we hear is BS. Most Americans, including those voting for her or considering voting for her, are completely in the dark. They don't have the foggiest idea what she'll do to them.
They're voting for her because she's not Trump, which is the wrong reason to vote for anyone. But we voted for Trump because he wasn't a regular politician, which is the wrong reason to vote for anyone. It should have been policy. We should have been voting on policy. But now we're voting people into office for now 3 elections because they're not the other candidate. For 3 elections now, from Trump's first time in office to Biden to now Trump versus Kamala, we are voting for someone because they're not the other person. That is the wrong way to vote. We should be voting for the best candidate, not between the better of the 2 worst candidates. The better of the 2 worst options is not the best option.
Their families, the country, nothing.
That is a false dichotomy and a false choice, and we've made 2 false choices, and we're now about to make a third.
She never wanted a
I don't know why they
substantive
would.
discussion on her real views, policy ideas.
I saw a Christian the other day say that she thought abortion was okay because it was keeping, what did she say? It was a student on campus talking to somebody, and I was like, wow, the way she answered, it just total disregard for her, the teachings of Christianity, like total disregard. Just to say, oh yeah, well, we do it to do this, so yeah, that's fine. Like, wait. Are you a Christian, or are you just one of those people that's like, yeah, my family's Christian, they go to church, I come sometimes. Yeah, I'm Christian. It's like, because you wouldn't have said what you said, such an ignorant statement, I don't know how you can be a Christian or even spiritual and think that there is a all-powerful, all-good creator that you could sit down and have a conversation with right now, hypothetically, and you could tell him, no. You would think that he would agree with you with abortion. There's no way you could really think that. No way. There's no way you could think that an all-loving creator would agree with you with abortion. Absolutely not. And if you're black and you look up the history of Planned Parenthood, who started it, why they started it, what their objective was, and you still, then something's wrong. Something's wrong.
Ideology.
All right, so we're going to go to Warren Smith, and then we're going to call it a night. Oh, no, Warren Smith, and then Adam and Stitch. Sorry. I'm not going to watch all of this, just a little bit.
I feel like this issue, but do you have a legal right to a single gender bathroom? I'm not sure I completely understand this term, this term of rights.
Really?
Yeah, I really don't.
You don't understand the...
When extreme leftists, or even when the average Democrat, or I've seen some Republicans do it, I don't see it as often on the Republican side, argues if they don't understand what a basic word that everyone's using means, it's really disingenuous and embarrassing. Just don't do that.
Mother being concerned about her 6-year-old. You really don't understand rights?
No, I'm following you here. I'm following you here.
this.
I mean, the reason I don't care about this is because I just don't know that these situations you're describing are happening.
My only problem with Warren Smith is that he's relatively skinny. And as a guy who's been chubby for most of my life, yeah, I'm a little jealous.
Well, there's a contradiction because it's
when the
female
audience
versus
watches
male.
that, they're going to say, this guy is creating all these mental gymnastics and overcomplicating something that is so simple, and this is so frustrating for so many people. If I identify as a woman, should I be able to compete in women's sports?
I feel like this issue is not something I terribly care about. I think that, let me be clear. I think
Should I be able to?
trans people
or
are people,
not?
and that they should have the same dignity that everybody else has. But I think that that's a question. I think that's a social question, but it's also a question of whether or not the government should be involved or not.
So should I be able to play?
I think that's up to the sports league. I think sports league
in the
should figure it
Olympics,
out.
there's a big topic with the Olympics. Should I be able to compete if I'm in the boxing in the Olympics?
I think that's up to the Olympics. I think that those people are probably the best in the world to assess
Okay,
whether or
got
not.
it. Should I be able to use the locker room? At the gym?
Again, I think it's up to the policies of the sports league. I mean,
But who's making? But there's no sports league making that decision. This is a legal decision. That's the problem here.
How so?
Because it comes down to the rights of the women in that space, and saying, okay, so if I decide tomorrow that I'm female, I'm legally getting all access to all the legal I'm getting all legal access.
By the way, for the boxer, the news came out. I'm going to say the woman. The woman is a hermaphrodite. She does have XY chromosomes. She does have a micropenis, and she does have undetested, whatever, when they fall down, balls. So her balls are where the ovaries are. They're still inside. Because for those that don't know, those that haven't passed 5th grade biology, 4th grade biology, 5th grade biology, the ovum and the testes start off the same. The penis and the clitoris starts off the same. It isn't until you get flushed with either testosterone or get flushed with estrogen that you develop the genitalia, the sexual differences between the two genders, and then in puberty you get that second flush, and that takes everything. I, for instance, was born super preemie, so I didn't get the flush of testosterone when I was born. So I had some leftover feminine aspects. I was a very feminine child. I was a very feminine boy. I had slightly bigger boobs than everybody else. I had feminine features on my face. I didn't have any body hair, which made me believe I was never going to have body hair. Was that a wrong? Was that not correct? But yeah, I didn't have any of that. And my doctors told my father, like, hey, don't worry about this. They were talking about getting me is it a vasectomy? No, not vasectomy. The one where you get the boobs cut off. So they were going to like take the fat out of my boobs. But the doctor was like, he doesn't need it. Like, I know it's an elective surgery and he can get it, but he doesn't need it because when he goes through puberty, the testosterone will flush the estrogen out and he'll develop masculine traits like overnight. And my dad was worried about that. But the doctor was right. When puberty hit me, it hit me hard and I was not prepared. I was not prepared at all for how hard puberty was going to hit me. I went from being the most feminine person I had ever met, that anyone had ever met, to being like one of the most masculine presenting people anyone ever meets. My arms are massive. So I went from being a twig to looking like I could beat the shit out of you overnight. It was bizarre. It was fun beating up my bullies. I won't lie. That was fun. But yeah. But this boxer didn't have my thing where he was born a preemie. Being born super preemie before the testosterone kicks in is one issue. This person was actually born hermaphrodite, so he has a micropenis and what is the word? Why can't I remember the word? Undetested? Undetested? Testes. Okay, undescended testes. So, and people are saying that he's a dude. No, he's a hermaphrodite, or she's a hermaphrodite, actually, technically speaking. She was born a female. She lived life as a female. Now, should there be a third gender? I think there should be. I think hermaphrodites and orchids, as they're more commonly called among themselves. And I had a friend in junior high who was an orchid, although she presented male, so he, but born so female genitals that look like male genitals. So the opposite situation of this boxer. And they were flush with testosterone. They had more testosterone than the average female, and they looked masculine. So I think there should be there should most definitely be a third gender for those who are born with chromosomal third genderism. I think that is legit. But that's less than 1% of the population. Like I said, you can have a similar situation just by being born preemie, being born before you get the flush of testosterone or the flush of estrogen. And you can also be born where you have a little bit more, if you're a female, you can be born with a little bit more testosterone. So these are not terrible things. So I just want to be clear on that, because some of what's being said here is rhetorical strategery and not fact.
As a woman.
But do you have a legal right to a single gender bathroom? Does anybody?
If a man goes into a female's restroom, I would say that would be illegal. The police could get involved, could they not?
Well, what would you be
In a
arrested
public
for? I guess?
bathroom.
Yeah, I guess what would
In
you be
an
arrested
airport.
for?
Sexually exposing myself to a female?
Can you use? I mean, I feel like a person.
So you think it's? I'm just trying to understand.
No.
So I looked like a girl when I was a boy. And then overnight, well, not overnight, over one summer, my biceps were bigger than my head. Good night, Slippery Bill. And I was talking to Santiago, by the way. But aren't you describing secondary well, yes, secondary sexual sex characteristics is what we're talking about. But when a child is born, that's really all you can tell. They haven't gone through puberty yet, so you don't know. It's almost like Catholicism with you got to get chrismed at like 15 to actually be a Catholic, even though you got baptized as a Catholic as a child. You get that first hit of testosterone in your mother's womb, and that's what makes your brain develop into a masculine brain. Or if you're a female, you get hit by a second hit of estrogen, which gives you the female brain. That sets you up for puberty. And in puberty, you get that second hit depending on what side you're predisposed to based on your genetics and your chromosomes. And those second sex characteristics are extremely important. And they're not just simply second sex. This tells you whether or not you're fertile or not. That means whether or not you can reproduce for another generation. So it actually, if you believe in pheromones, it's going to dictate, at least through hormones anyway, who's attracted to you and who you're attracted to. So this is very important. It dictates how you think. It dictates how emotional you are. I have done many, many tests throughout my lifetime. I am female-brained. And I think Jordan Peterson is also female-brained, so that's just kind of a funny quink-dink. But I think in words. I think in conversations. I don't think in images so much, although I do have a very active imagination. But I think in conversations, and I think in words. So I remember conversations and details, and having an argument with me is completely insane for most people because they want to argue with me the way they argue with a guy, and then I'll bring up something from the past, like 10 years before. They're like, "Why are you remembering that?" So yeah, no, I mean, I had estrogen. I didn't have enough testosterone when I was born, and then because I'm a male, I was just born too early. There was no genetic or chromosomal problems with me. When I hit puberty, everything kicked in, and wow, that did kick in. But it also meant that I went from having no temper to having an amazing temper. Like I had to learn how to control my anger. I had to learn how to control rage. I had to learn how to control aggression, much more than the average male, because I got super dumped with testosterone. My testosterone was actually higher than other boys my age. And it caused a lot of emotional problems. So I went from having lower than average testosterone to having higher than average testosterone. And it was my body's way of compensating for the higher estrogen in my system. So like I was like a raw nerve, and a lot of teenagers have that, but for me it was a bit more extreme because of the preemie status of me being born a preemie and such an extreme preemie. So though we're getting way too far into my own personal bullshit, let's get back to Warren.
No, totally.
Is it
I think
okay?
I think a man can use any bathroom without exposing himself to others, even if it's a public bathroom.
So I'm just trying to
So
understand.
it's a very there's a line somewhere, but
So if I identify as a woman, I should be able to have access to that locker room.
I think that you should obey the law, for sure.
So it is about laws. It's not about a sports league.
Well, there's a conflation here between access and taking action in the bathroom. And if I'm a person who,
By the way, thank you, testosterone. I love the fact that I lost my great, beautiful hair. Thank you, testosterone. I really appreciate that part. And I still have the boobies. My boobs, even when I work out all the time. Even when I'm in great, great shape, my boobs are bigger than most people I know, male or female. Like I think I'm a size C, and I have a 46, like just growth wise, I have a 46 inch chest. When I'm really working out, like I'm really pumping iron, I can get up to 47 inches on my chest, which I'm 5'7", so that's huge. Like I have a huge muscular chest, and I have huge muscular arms. And before my diabetic muscle loss, I had huge muscular legs. Like my legs look like tree trunks. Now that I've redeveloped the muscle that I've lost, I've replaced it with new muscle, because you can never get the muscle that atrophied back. My legs look good, but I'm never going to be as strong as I was. I'm never going to be able to lift as heavy as I used to lift when I was in great shape. But again, that was all testosterone. So I actually have, from my arms being so big, I have stretch marks from how big they got. Like in my teenage years, I legitimately had 20-inch biceps, and it was scary looking for most people. And to maintain that level of working out, it's just impossible when you're 44.
fully clothed goes into a
That's what a
stall.
changing room is for. It's for changing your clothes. I'm going, by essence of the purpose of the changing room, I'm going to.
You have no idea how many people ask me if I was on testosterone. I'm like, nope, because I never took it. It's just my body compensated by dumping a junk ton.
Have to take off my clothes, put on new clothes.
But is it a requirement that you do this, that you don't take some propriety into account and do it behind a
If
stall
you
or
go
curtain?
into a locker room and there's no dividers, it's a locker room. Do you see how this could, do you understand why it's about a policy applied to this? You can't go, well, this locker room needs divided. We can't go space by space and defend one space for it and say, can't you do this behind a divider? Can't you go into a stall here? That's why it's about, like, do I get legal access or do I not?
That's interesting. Do I get legal access?
It feels like this person never played sports before, to be very honest, the way this conversation is going. It's like the other person's never been in a locker room before.
Should they get legal access?
I think that is a question of whether or not. Well, first of all, I mean, the reason I don't care about this is because I just don't know that the situations you're describing are happening in any kind of mass.
See, that's the response I often get is like, why should I care about this? I don't think it's an issue. Why would you have no right to care about this? But a mother in that changing room with a 6-year-old, if I walk into that changing room, you're saying that she doesn't have the right to make that decision of whether her 6-year-old sees me or not. I don't care about it. I don't care. But that 6-year-old,
I'm not sure it's about
is it
rights.
right for that 6-year-old that mother doesn't have a right to make that decision for her 6-year-old? That is a right. And if you say, well, why do we need to care about this? You're saying she doesn't have that right.
Well,
She
hold on a
shouldn't
second.
care.
How is it a right if anybody at any point, anywhere, can do something lewd?
The person that he's talking to is an idiot, because there are indecency laws. Like if you're a dude and you're peeing in public, like even if you go to a wall or to a fence and you're not seen by anybody, if a police drives by and sees you peeing outside, you can get a ticket for indecent exposure, even if no one sees you. So, yeah, no, this is a law that already exists. So I don't know why this guy's acting naive, other than to be dishonest or bad faith.
I mean, like this doesn't necessarily happen in a bathroom. I mean, this can happen anywhere in the world.
I often get that response. So it's like,
well, so then
but
what's
because
the...
you can go outside and expose yourself, therefore that mother has no right to say, wait a minute, my 6-year-old's standing right here. You're a guy with a beard claiming to be a woman. I don't want my 6-year-old to see a penis. You're saying, look, I could go outside and take my penis out at any point in time. Therefore, you have no right to be concerned. Do you follow the logic here? Is that really the case you want to make?
Well, no, it's... I guess the reason I pose that the risk is there is because if I think what you're saying is, is that a risk that we want to exaggerate or make more available in a place where people do the very thing you don't want to happen, right? You don't want that exposure in a place where in the locker room, people are exposed.
People with penises changing in front of women.
Correct.
Do they have the right? Does a person with a penis have the right to say, I identify as a female?
I don't know where I was in another country, but it was unisex changing with male and female. I don't know what country it was, and I don't know why I was there, but I know I've been in that situation. It might have just been California, but it might as well be another country. But I've been in a situation where it was unisex changing, and it was awkward, especially as a teenage boy. It was awkward. But I mean, I changed. I didn't like second guess it. I went in, took a shower, changed, got out. I do not know where I was. I don't know if I was in Mexico. I don't think it's when I went to China with my wife. I don't think there was a unisex thing there. Because there were male and female bathrooms at all the places that we went to. Could have been Mexico, could have been it could have been California.
Female, and I'm going to go in there and I have a space. Let's keep it as simple as that, because that's as simple as it is.
Someplace with a beach.
We could overcomplicate this to dodge the question, but we're not that silly. Let's continue with the logic.
Well, with the logic, I'm not sure I completely understand this term, this term of rights.
Really?
Yeah, I really don't.
You don't understand the mother being concerned about her 6-year-old.
No, I understand the concern, but I'm not talking about the
right
concern.
To make a decision whether her 6-year-old is exposed to a penis or not. That's a right. That's why we have laws. That's why you're not allowed to go outside and pull your pants down on a playground. Do you understand that? It's not that complicated. You really don't understand rights?
No, I'm following you here. I'm following you here. I have the right, and the right is granted by the forcible removal of that person from that situation, like the aggressor from that situation.
I mean, I tend to think that these are inalienable rights that are granted to us within this country. The idea of where do rights.
So this is something that's interesting.
Inalienable rights granted by God, God-given rights.
Because imagine that you have,
which we talked about earlier,
person who didn't want their child to be exposed to any genitalia, male or female.
But that's you're overcomplicating.
No, I don't think I am. Because what we're talking about is the right to not have a male genitalia in a female bathroom. But what if I'm a person who wants the right to not see female genitalia in a female bathroom?
Look,
isn't that a right as well, or it's not a right?
You have the right to not have a female come in and sexually assault you or expose herself. You have that right. If you also have the right to, if you are concerned about changing in front of men, you're probably not going to go into the male's changing room. You might do it at home or whatnot. But you still have the right, if you would like to change in the male's changing room, to change in the male's changing room and not have a woman see you do so. You can understand that.
What I'm saying is that you in a gendered bathroom, if I see a male's genitalia as a male,
if that really bothers you, then there's other alternatives. You could not use the urinal. You could go into we could overcomplicate this, but
it's not an overcomplication if what we're talking about is where something on a playground is inappropriate, but in a locker room it is appropriate. Now we're saying that because the gender is different, it's inappropriate.
You can understand why, though, right? Surely.
Oh yeah, I understand why people.
Do they have the right to say?
Well, but this is the question. This is the question: is do they have the right? Because you don't have a right to say in a male locker room a male's genitalia is inappropriate. You don't have the right to do that. If I were to call the police on a male
definition, that's the purpose of the changing rooms, for you to go in there and
change. That's right. It is the purpose of changing.
Only men.
Right, but the expectation is that you have rights granted by law, and if a person is if a person is exposed but also being very lewd, I think that would violate the law, right?
Surely, yeah.
Right, of course.
Like sexually assault a male, another male.
Even just from a visual perspective.
But we're talking about changing.
Correct. If a person, so then the difference is the expectation of this room is to be single-gendered, and now there's a contradiction here. Does that give you the right?
I don't understand.
Well, there's a contradiction because it's
when
female
the audience
versus
watches
male.
it, they're going to say this guy is creating all these mental gymnastics and overcomplicating something that is so simple, and this is so frustrating for so many people because people are acting like they cannot understand when the mother says, no, you can't do that in here in front of my 6-year-old. I have a right to make that decision. It doesn't make me transphobic.
But you're not making the decision for you, you're making it for another.
As a mother is allowed to do.
No, not for your child. You're making it for the person who's there that you don't want there. That's
No, your mother making, the audience is going to say, what are you talking, you're making this over, the mother is saying, I'm making the decision for my,
He's trying to equate it to racism. That's what he's trying to equate it to. He's just not getting there.
I don't want my child to see a penis today.
Right, but you're then telling another person they have to take action different than what they want.
Correct.
Right, but that's where this becomes a question of rights, because whose rights are more important? The person who is the mother or the person who is of a different gender or representative?
Right, exactly. And so when we introduced exactly, this is why it's not just about the sports league, it's actually about, at the beginning of this conversation, actually is about laws. Because if I
think you're right. You've convinced me.
Okay.
You're right. It is about laws.
Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if I decide tomorrow that I identify as a woman, the legal implications of that are going to determine my rights, right? So okay, do I have the right to go into that? Because that now affects the rights of everyone who has access to that space already, women.
Well, I think it depends on how you behave.
So that's why there are many women. No, it's not about, it's about legal. We just identified this is actually about laws.
Well, no. It's not. It is about law.
All the women who it's going to impact women, which is why there are so many women saying that this is.
Well, if it impacts women,
we can clearly identify how that will have legal implications. It will have implications on women using that space.
Well, hold on. If I'm a male in a male locker room and I see male genitalia, appropriate. If that person is doing something, I think we can all imagine, inappropriate, then it becomes an issue. If a person who is...
I saw an article from a gay news site a few days ago where the gentleman was talking about or complaining about a bathhouse that he usually attends. And that when he went, there were trans men there. I'm going to call it a gaggle of trans men, more than one. And he was there to cruise. And they obviously weren't interested in him. And he's like, he felt discriminated against might be the wrong term, but he's like, he went there to pick up, and there was nothing there that he could pick up because none of them were interested in him because they were interested in femmes. And he was super frustrated, and he's like, this is a cruising spot. Like, what are you doing? You're messing it up. He was more crass than that. But that's just what this conversation reminds me of. Where he went to the bathhouse to pick up a dude, and everyone there was trans masculine. And on top of that, none of them were interested in him because he was cis masculine.
Transgender enters any bathroom. They're not causing a problem until they do, right? They're not causing a problem until that exposure takes place.
The problem occurs if the mother, we're trying to make this as simple as possible. The mother doesn't want her daughter in this hypothetical to see a penis.
Sure.
You're not behaving necessarily, but the question is, does she have that right? You're not like doing anything crazy.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
You're a woman.
So let me ask you
You're
this.
trying to change your clothes, but you have a penis. Do they have a right to not be okay with that?
If you're...
It's as simple as that.
Well, first of all, whether a person is upset or not can influence the law, can change the law, but the determination of the law is supposed to be objective, right? It's supposed to be justice.
It should be, yes, which is why it's not about hypotheticals of are there stalls? Why does she feel that way? She shouldn't feel that way because you're exposed to other people with male genitalia in the male's restroom. You're absolutely right in that point.
But the issue isn't whether or not they enter the room. It's not whether they enter the locker room or not. That's not the issue.
How so?
Because if
where is the issue?
The issue is when they're exposed to something inappropriate. That's the issue.
Okay, let's take this because it's not true. Because they might not. No, because they have to take off their clothes. And they might not want a bearded person who identifies as a woman watching them do so. That bearded person doesn't even need to take off his clothes. Does she have a right to not get naked in front of a dude with a beard who identifies as a woman?
So this kind of reminds me of medical, I can't remember the term right now, but it's basically like medical trans. So there are some trans people that believe that trans is a medical issue. And not just as in like getting therapy for the issue and getting diagnosed, but as in you have to actually transition to be trans. So if you haven't had the surgery, one way or the other, and you're not living the lifestyle, you're not doing what it takes to look or to live as the other gender, then you're not truly trans. This is, again, within the trans community. This is not like an outside conversation. This is an in-house conversation that I'm not part of in any kind of way. But that's what this reminds me of. It reminds me of that conversation where if a trans person was femme and looked femme in every way, and they entered into the female restroom, would other females have a problem with this person? And the answer is mostly no. It's when the trans person looks like the opposite gender that the problems grow. That doesn't mean there's not some bigots in there, or there's not some people who are extra offended or extra sensitive who wouldn't also have a problem with it. Like Muslim women who they're not allowed to even touch someone of the opposite gender would still have a problem. Okay, so there are other reasons why some people are going to have an issue with this, other than just the obvious reasons. There's religious reasons. There's private concern reasons. J.K. Rowling actually does a pretty good job of explaining it, which is funny because people really hate her for explaining it, but she does a good job of explaining the situation of the different reasons why women wouldn't want someone of a masculine gender or someone who has XY chromosomes in the same bathroom with them. Aside from all of that stuff, this conversation that they're having here and that conversation is very similar in conversation.
I would say that she has control of that, right? She has the ability whether or not she does that. Like you said, if a person doesn't like what they're experiencing in a space, they have the freedom to leave. Everybody's personal issues don't necessarily reflect
the wider implications of that, though. So now, if you're in an airport, and you go into a restroom, there's going to be that person with the beard who identifies as a woman.
I also think I've been when I was flying, that's why I was thinking about China, because when I was flying, there was an airport that had a unisex bathroom, and I went to the men's bathroom first when all the stores were full, and I really had to pee, so I went to the unisex one. I don't know where that was. I don't even know if that was in the United States, because that was a very long flight.
Might be in the stall next to you. Your only response to that is say, that shouldn't bother you, but it might bother them.
No, I didn't say it shouldn't bother them. I think they have every right to be bothered.
Can you acknowledge how this does have legal implications of access to the room? I just gave you an example.
You gave me an example of a person who...
See, I think that's actually the better solution to this problem. Hear me out. I think having the 3-bathroom solution is the better solution. I think having and I've seen places that actually have 4-bathroom solution. So the 4-bathroom solution is family stall, female stall, male stall, unisex stall. I've seen that. I think that's a great solution. I think the 3-1 is fine, which is where you have women's bathroom, women only, unisex, and then male only bathrooms. I think that's actually a really good solution. So if you're not comfortable, you can just go to the one you identify as, and if you are comfortable, you just go to the unisex one. I think that's actually a pretty fair solution, just to be very blunt about it.
Who enters a room, doesn't like what they find there, and then
so you're saying
can choose to leave or not.
You should just have to go to another restroom. That woman is in the wrong, not the guy with the beard.
I'm saying that we all get to have the personal freedom to choose how we want to navigate the world. And the things that you choose to care about are up to you.
Okay,
I've left rooms before.
There's no way to have conversations about laws if we can't take a hypothetical and examine that hypothetical and you just say,
well, we just
and we'll hear this when we watch the Stitch and Adam piece, if I can find that, where that audio is.
Different room. You're saying that the woman doesn't have the legal right then?
Okay, if I enter a room and someone is, like clearing their throat really aggressively, and I don't want to hear that.
It's a false comparable. It's absolutely false comparable, and you know it.
Why?
Clearing your throat is not comparable to being exposed to genitalia. Can you acknowledge that?
I think that it is, it's definitely different. But
Dude, you're going to lose the audience the second. Really, come on. You're a smart guy. You can see how a 6-year-old, I don't want my 6-year-old to be exposed or have to be viewed changing their clothes, and you're going to say that's
well, there's a lot of conflations that are happening
here.
There's a lot of conflations here. If a person is, it has to be, you can't just talk about how it's simple. It's clearly a complex issue if we're talking about it for this long. And the complexity occurs by making sure you're specific with your definitions. When is this a problem? It's a problem when...
We don't get to determine that. That's the whole point of the law. It's blanket policy. You don't get to enter that room because I can't decide when it's a problem. That's why we have laws. You either have access to that, you either get the rights as a guy with a beard who identifies as a woman, or you don't. And I'm saying you don't. because we cannot decide. It doesn't go case by case when it bothers someone or not. That's not how laws work.
You're right. I think the question is, at what point are we infringing on somebody else's right by by not having a conversation about what's reasonable?
And
I think that's really the question. What is a reasonable thing?
When what is important to you overrides what is important to someone else. So you decide you're a woman. Okay, the moment I try and accommodate that, but now it infringes on that 6-year-old, or it infringes on that woman. We now have a clearly identifiable line being crossed. We can say, wait a minute, we cannot implement this legally because it is infringing. That's it.
Do you guys want to continue on with this one, or let's move on to Stitch and Adam? I'm going to let this play out for at least 15 more seconds.
Objective measurement.
Well, I don't think it's objective. I don't think it's objective because a person who is upset about that, there are plenty of people who are not upset about it.
But again, we can't go whether or not you're upset. Just because someone's not upset by it doesn't mean that this person doesn't have the right to be upset about it.
No, but now there's a conflation between the right.
Okay. And that actually plays into a conversation I heard earlier today on Michael Beverly's channel. Go subscribe to him if you're not. All right, we're going to do Stitch and Adam. I don't know which of the videos has the thing. I don't even know where the thing is. So we'll see how this goes. So we're just going to skim through this one and that one. And if we don't see it, we don't worry about it.
It's your boy PSH here with another Sunday show with everyone's favorite. Cannot wait to say President heard around the internet where Sam Seder dishonestly, disgustingly, with most vile and maliciousness accuses our queen change to allow some kind of leeway to the hospitals and doctors without fear of going to jail, without having it just be like a
okay. This is where we want it to be. Hold on,
and just like pull it out of her until they couldn't actually pull the fetus out of her. I should say until it had died on its own. And essentially, because they had
only in the case of, let's say, a danger to
heard around the internet where Sam Seder dishonestly, disgustingly, with most vile. Right? I guess we'll talk about Peanut, and then after we watch that, depending on our time, there is.
So this is they actually start off right with the section I wanted to play, so we're going to be good there.
A very interesting clip that I want to watch, which is Sam Seder and Emma basically running defense and interference for Hassan, and Hassan is watching it. So we're gonna have like a reaction inception party of us reacting to Hassan, reacting to Sam Seder, reacting to Hassan, and it's insane to see Sam and Emma just run this interference for Hassan and Hassan's interview with the maybe Houthi pirate, we don't know Houthi pirate, where they keep doing this thing, and this happens a lot. Sam does this, Emma does this, where they'll like defend someone of some accusation, and then when you press them, they say, "Well, I don't know. It's like, well, why did you defend it then? Why didn't you say I don't know from the beginning?"
Yeah. They don't want to get caught, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
They got to use the I don't know defense.
So anyway, ready to jump into this?
Yeah, let's do it.
I think it's a right that
There's a lot of ums and uhs. So
what's a transcript look like? Let's bring it up.
When taken away, deprives people.
Oh my God. Particularly a good segment here.
Who have babies, their sovereignty over their own body, and it's both an economic issue and a personal liberty issue.
What do you think there should be restrictions
on abortion?
Yeah.
I mean, the problem with
yes
restrictions, like for instance, we say only in the case of, let's say, a danger to a woman, or a woman's life, is that is extremely difficult to assess where that line is. We've seen this. 2 women have died at least in Texas as a function of the abortion ban that they have there. We also know that infant mortality in the wake of the Texas thing, because there's been studies on this, increased 15% in the wake of the abortion ban there. So in general, I would say...
Now, I've heard that claim be refuted by some of the pro-life advocates out there. So there's some kind of nuance there about the death that Stitch and Adam don't know about. I don't know enough about it to speak on it, but I do know there is some contestation. I'm running out of words. I'm getting tired. About the circumstances of the death and all that kind of stuff.
Say that restrictions are in practice not viable, not doable, because you end up costing women their lives. I think that to the extent that I would have restrictions, I think you need a medical provider to provide abortions, in that go past the. Maybe midway through the second trimester.
So it's kind of interesting thing that happens in this conversation where I know we talked about this a little bit, so maybe you have a different take on this than I do. Is that in the conversation, Sam puts zero thought or idea whatsoever into the concept that this fetus that you are, killing could at any point in time be considered like a human being.
Right. Yeah.
Deserving of some kind of equal protection from the law or just protection of life or anything like that. Like Sam doesn't even consider that at any point in the conversation, which I find interesting as someone who is also pro-choice.
So again, I was actively pro-death until I was like sometime between 18 and 22. And then from 22 up until 30, I was pro-free choice, not pro-choice. That's a different issue. But I was I was a free will absolutist, and I believed in free choice. That doesn't free one from consequences. That doesn't mean something is morally right. It could be morally wrong, but that people have the right to choose for themselves, even to commit a crime, even to do something evil, and we don't have a right to tell them that they can't choose to do so. It doesn't mean that we don't judge them for it afterwards. It doesn't mean that there's no consequences. It just means that we don't have the right to force a choice on someone or to force someone not to choose something. That was my stance for a very long time. It is only after reading the Church Fathers, reading the Didache, and again, listening to scientists talk about when life began, that I became pro-life. And that, again, is in the last 6 years. That's not like, I was already a Catholic when I finally became pro-life. And it isn't just because it was the church's stance. Like, for 2 years there, 3 years there, I agreed with the church's stance, even though I didn't understand it. So, it was submission of the will before it became acceptance, intellectual acceptance.
Yeah, when the personhood actually begins. I mean, as a society, we're kind of dialing in on that date. So it's interesting because obviously I would separate this into two questions, like in a perfect world, where should we draw the line? And then I would look at the other question of, is there going to be some sort of fallout because public officials get it wrong or doctors are afraid to step in because the law is unclear? Mm-hmm. And just like separating into those two questions, then you can talk about it clearly. You can say, look, when do you think it actually is, there is some sort of personhood going on here? And we have to think of this as two independent lives, right? Even though one is living inside the other.
Right.
Yeah.
And there is, because he said that there are these two women in Texas that died. So I was curious because I looked this up because I don't know about these cases. And one of them seems pretty crazy. Or actually both of them seem pretty crazy. So we have this woman named Josley Barnaca, who essentially, the fetus was on the verge of coming out early, and it was going to be like, it was going to come out too early and it was going to die anyway. And they couldn't, because of the...
Yeah, but they also act as if like people don't die in abortions. People can die from an abortion as well, or from a bad cocktail. So like, some of this is a little bit one-sided in the reporting. So
the laws in Texas, they couldn't actually...
just to be clear, I'm not saying that, abortions are especially dangerous. Obviously, one of the two involved always gets killed. You know what I mean? That's what an abortion is. But the people die while getting wisdom teeth taken out. Do you understand? I'm not saying that zero risk is the goal. I'm just saying we got to take into consideration that people die from giving birth. People also die from getting abortions. So let's not play semantics. That's not even the right word. Anyway.
Like abort the baby and just like pull it out of her until they couldn't actually pull the fetus out of her, I should say, until it had died on its own. And essentially, because they had to wait for 40 hours extra for the fetus to die on its own before they pulled it out of her, she died of infection, I believe. Infection and sepsis.
Sepsis, yeah.
Yeah.
Ouch.
And it is kind of despicable and disgusting if, I mean, I think everyone would agree, even the pro-life people would agree, that the law is totally fucked up and there needs to be some way of adjudicating this properly so that if a woman, even if you're the most pro-life person on the planet, if the baby's going to die, you know, and they have to pull it out for the woman to survive, and they, you know, we have multiple instances of this not happening, then the law has to be changed to allow some kind of leeway.
And this is the problem with Trent Horn's and Lila Rose's stance, is that it doesn't allow for these situations to be addressed.
The hospitals and doctors without.
If you're an absolutist, if you're an extremist, you don't allow for the one-off cases. So you need to have exceptions. The exceptional case still needs to be allowed for. In the Bible, whenever the Bible, these people are religious people, so that's why I'm using the Bible as an example here, not as a political thing. Even in the Bible, when the rule is set, there's always an exception. There's always a way out. There's a free city that you can go to. There's a way around the punishment. You have to have exceptions. And if you're an absolutist and an extremist, if you're a zealot, you're actually doing things wrong. You're actually hurting your cause and hurting innocent people. In order to punish all the guilty, you're punishing innocent people. That's why the Jeffersonian idea, the American idea, that it's better to let 100 guilty men go free than let one innocent man suffer, is the proper response. That's the idea that you want. Not that it's better that 100 innocent people suffer so no guilty person escapes justice. That is the wrong way of thinking. That is destruction. That is tyranny. That is dictatorship. That is terribleness. That is horribleness. That is hell. So it needs to be the other way, where it's better to let 100 guilty people go free than to let one innocent person suffer. That's the way it has to be. You have to make room for the exception.
Fear of going to jail.
You have to have mercy and compassion.
Without, you know, having it just be like some massive loophole that everyone can utilize.
Yeah, that's a problem. And it does seem like they argue before this about the death penalty, and Tim Pool makes this big.
I need a pillow like
death
that.
Penalty because the state can make a mistake and accidentally kill
To
somebody.
support my head a little bit better.
Like, this is the same exact situation, right? The state is making a mistake and some innocent woman is dying.
Right.
So, I mean, this is why, for the same reason Tim Pool is against the death penalty, at this point, I mean, I would kind of lean towards the no restrictions, just because I'm worried some innocent woman is going to die.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with Adam.
Look, this is why I'd like to separate it into two questions here, because we're talking about the question of whether or not the state can screw up, right? And is going to cause harm unknowingly, right? And the other question is like, when can we confidently say these are two people that we're dealing with here? Like we deal with two people, obviously, in like self-defense matters, right? Like all these different kinds of situations, we're dealing with two people and trying to weigh the rights of both. Like this is kind of that scenario. So, but the state is obviously going to screw up somewhere. So,
well, I wonder if the issue too with this is like, because obviously when you have the situation where women die because the hospital refused to provide proper care, like they're going to sue the hospital and the hospital's going to lose.
All right, guys, I got to go to work in the morning. I know they didn't get to their point. All right, this was good. So we did the political pregame yesterday. We did all the political topics today. Not all of them, but we did like 3. Tomorrow we'll do the election coverage. And then I guess Wednesday we will have a new president. I don't know if we'll talk politics, anything beyond that. But this was good. Have a good night, everyone. Let's do the music. God bless. Love you all. Forgive everyone for everything and live a good life. Do good. Good night.
stick, it's my time to shine.
Yeah, I'ma train hard, mistakes turn into learned scars. To build a brickyard, it's one by one, each bar. So build it tall, build it strong, build it large. And build a base first, so reliable you can reach the stars.
Lights so